Father Ian Van Heusen here. I'm here with Rob Agnelli. And this is actually my first time meeting Rob. We just met like 5 seconds before. Yep. So actually, you can introduce yourself for the audience and for myself as well. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. My name is Rob Agnelli. I grew up in Westchester County, outside New York City.
By the way, I went to high school at West Point.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah,
okay.
the local high school, James I. O'Neill.
Yeah, so I used to like work there on the weekends. I work at the Army football games.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I did too.
Yeah, did you really?
So I wonder if there's any overlap.
Yeah.
So I was there around the 90s.
Okay.
Like 96, 97.
Yeah, I was early 90s. I would overlap with you, but it was great. It was great. We won't talk about the age difference at all. And so I came to North Carolina. I went to NC State. Yeah. And I got a degree in statistics and ended up staying in Raleigh. And then about mid-20s, I had my first son, caught the fire for the faith, went and got a master's degree in theology. And so now I'm trying to spread it as much as I possibly can.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, what we're going to talk a little bit about today, we're going to be talking about the virtues. We're going to be doing a series on the virtues. And I want to talk a little bit about temperance, but as a kind of segue into it, what do you remember about like food growing up? Were you like, what's your Italian?
The Italian family. I have 3 sisters, and my mom. Dinner was a big deal in our house. Yeah. Dinner was a big deal.
See, not so much for us actually.
Yeah.
We were always on the move with sports, and we ate a lot of fast food, a lot of food on the road. My mom wasn't big on like sit down meals. So with you guys, it was sit down meals.
Oh yeah, and temperance wasn't even a thing. I'm not sure that was the thing I even knew about. I can remember my sisters. Like I used to take their cake and I'd stick my finger in it because I was like, that's mine. And I'd do all 4 pieces and they'd be all mine. The anti-temperance, right?
So you don't really remember much like fasting being emphasized? Or,
no,
because we were growing up in the 90s.
We kind of grew up in that time where like, even in the church, right? Like fasting really wasn't a thing at all.
I mean, when I first started fasting, I was in college, and I remember like the first time I felt really hungry and I went a day without eating. And I remember having to deal with like the fear of like, am I doing damage to myself? And it's so weird. American culture, people literally think that if you go a day without eating, that you will die. Suddenly your kidneys will stop functioning or something, or you're gonna. You see some of the social media posts around Ash Wednesday, like make sure you stay hydrated. Like, when's the last time you've heard somebody like dehydrate? I know people get dehydrated, but
how about the desert fathers, right? They go out in the desert. I don't remember any of them getting dehydrated. They have to come out and give them like a water break or something, right?
Exactly.
So that is not something like I grew up in, and some of that was I went to Catholic school, but some of it was just not a point of emphasis then at all. Like, and I think that just goes to the bigger like issue with penance anyway, right? Like,
what school did you go to?
I went to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton.
Okay,
yeah,
in New York.
First
See, I almost went to Burke Catholic. It was near West Point, but I ended up going to a public school instead. My parents kind of wished now maybe they sent me to Catholic school. Maybe that was for the better.
Maybe it turned out okay.
It worked out fine.
Probably worked out.
It worked out fine. But anyway, so so it's interesting because the relationship with food is, so in the Catholic Church, there is kind of like this cultural stuff that we've lost a little bit. We actually can see it a lot with the Orthodox, where they have like layers of fasting, and then they have special foods that they eat during Lent. This was kind of the whole, have you ever seen the Polish donuts? Because it's interesting, as much as I'm all about fasting, and I don't want to emphasize food as much, I have seen when you introduce Catholics to this idea of a food culture that's connected with the liturgical seasons, and there's times when you're denying certain foods, sometimes when you have certain foods, like the St. Joseph's cake. It kind of really makes things special, right?
Yeah, well, the other thing too is like the genius of the church, right? How there's enough fasting days throughout the liturgical calendar that you actually get the virtue of fasting, right?
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't get otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And so that really is countercultural, especially, in like the filet of fish culture where you're, like, oh, well, I can't eat meat today. I'll just eat, 7 filet of fish sandwiches instead. So yeah, I mean, and that's really how I grew up. Like, yeah, we didn't eat meat on Fridays, but man, we had some good fish though, right? So, that was something that it took me a while, especially when I kind of reconverted back to the church, to really understand the benefit of, right? And not necessarily have that legalistic way of looking at it, but to really go, okay, this is really important and a virtue, right? Absolutely. Like and that part is really was really something new to me.
Let me flesh out a little bit for folks the virtue of temperance, and then we'll kind of come back to this relationship with food. So for St. Thomas Aquinas, he makes a division between the lower passions and the higher passions. And the lower passions called the concupiscible, or emotions, passions, emotions, you say the same thing. There's the concupiscible, which is your direct emotions, which is you love things, so you're attracted towards them, you hate. And for him, all the emotions are tied with experiences of good and evil. So when you experience evil, you're repulsed by it, you want to go away from evil. That's what hatred is, according to Aquinas. And then when you love something, you're attracted to it. So our love, in many ways you see with little kids, our love when we're younger is tied to physical things. And then over time, our love is purified so that we love higher things. We still love food, but so that we're not just so tied to our stomachs, as the Desert Fathers and the saints would say. So a big part of temperance is moderating our lower emotions, our animal selves, and our attachments to food. I mean, you've probably seen this as a parent, right? I mean, because little kids, I mean, they're all about, I mean, they're happy as long as they have food and they have comfort and safety.
Yeah.
But then as we're adults, we have to put ourselves in difficult situations where it's not comfortable. It's not.
Yeah, the comfort becomes almost like an enemy as you get older, right? Like,
Yeah.
And we have to learn how to kind of shun it in certain situations, well, almost all situations, right? Where, when I'm specifically doing things just because they're comfortable, like that's a heart of vice, right? Like it's disordered and it flips everything around, and I start loving things because they make me feel good rather than either just being good for me, perfecting me, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So the comfort is at the heart of it, with especially with temperance, right? So I have to learn how to first control the lower, but to clear the way for the higher, right?
Exactly.
I'm not going to love the higher things if I can't control myself in the lower things.
Yeah, and I love to think of it when it comes to these lower passions, it's kind of like training a dog. I have a dog. Do you have a dog or anything?
No.
So with dog training, there's kind of two extremes you can go to with dog training. One, if you are too controlling and too trying to control everything and make them submit and everything, then they can become mean and aggressive. They become territorial. And there's that, and that's where we talk about rigidity with the virtues. Mm-hmm. And rightfully so. I mean, rigidity is a thing where you're so controlled, you're so obsessed with having everything figured out. And then the opposite extreme is what they often refer to as laxism. So if you let your dog just go to the bathroom anywhere, you don't discipline it at all. The middle ground is a kind of disciplined approach and a kind of moderate approach. I'm sure you've seen that in a lot of ways. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that what you're talking about is St. Thomas uses a really good image of the horse, right? Where he says, like, if you meek a horse, and you can ride it really well, right? And the passions, when we actually have control of them, they help us to do the good like that much more intensely. Like when I can control myself, well, I can give myself away, right? Like and that part, like, that is something that people don't always grasp about, like the importance of virtue, because if you just look at it as, well, asceticism for asceticism's sake, right, which is tied to temperance a little bit, then you lose that thing. Well, this is actually supposed to perfect my nature and make me be able to do the good, like joyfully and energetically and all of those things, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And I want to add something. When we talk about, because you use the word control a lot, and I would say I like the word self-mastery a little bit better, because it's kind of like sailing. Like with sailing, you don't control the wind, but you work with it. You can't go against the wind. Yeah,
that's a great point.
You can't go against your nature, but you work with it. You kind of move with it. So in this regard, we looked at the liturgical cycle we were talking about before. The church gives us times to celebrate and to feast, and then times to fast. And that's such a beautiful rhythm of life, right? And we've kind of gotten this out of whack a little bit, right? Typically Fridays were day of penance, Sundays were day of rest, and maybe giving yourself a little bit more pleasure on Sunday with that rest. What are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I think that juxtaposition of feasting and fasting is really important, because I can't enjoy the feast if I don't have the fast, right? Like if I don't have the control. And it wasn't until I started fasting that I really enjoyed feasting, because it was, I was able to, it wasn't like I was devouring the food. I used to be a competitive bodybuilder, and it takes a lot of like dietary discipline, right?
Yeah.
But then the night of the show, when I was all done, I would go and I would just make myself, like I would eat so much stuff until I made myself sick, right? And I didn't enjoy it at all, right? Yeah. But had I sort of grasped what fasting was, like I would enjoy sitting down and having a pizza when I've been fasting for months, right? And you can't enjoy anything, again, going back to the thing about self-mastery, right? I can't enjoy anything without first being able to go into it freely. So I could say no to it if I wanted to, but it's a free or yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, as I get older, I find that the more you can stretch yourself, like the more discomfort you can embrace, that it really does, it stretches your capacity to love, your capacity to do so much more, right? I've been thinking about that a lot this week, because we've been filming a lot, and so it's kind of been a bit of a marathon. And I was telling Tim, I was like, when we're doing all these videos, in between, just all these kind of thought traps are surfacing, all this kind of negativity, and having to gently work against that. Pay attention to it, but working against it. That's something often you discover in fasting. You give yourself a bad day, you're dealing with discomfort, negativity surfaces, but then you defeat it, you grow.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the other part of it, right, is learning patience, like another virtue, right? Yeah. Patience, right? So that when I'm fasting, my kids can get on my nerves a little bit quicker, right? Because I'm a little hungry and I have to really be intentional about being patient, right? And then now my patience is growing, and the things that are out of my control, they're out of my control, and I can step back and go, this is okay, and I can suffer it if I need to. But if I don't if I'm not conditioned, or I don't have the virtue of temperance, and I'm used to just saying, this, I'm fasting today. You can't act up in any way. Just get away from me, right? That makes a big difference, right? And that has changed, like the way I parent, even when I'm not fasting, because suddenly I have patience. And the part that really gets to it is it becomes easier because there's a sweetness to it, because it fulfills our nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would give people as a tip when you're fasting is embrace positive thoughts, like joy. You probably did this when you were working out as a bodybuilder, right? I love the pain. Like, I mean, it's funny, we accept this with athletics, right? If a guy has like a great workout, he's like, love it, I'm pumped. I mean, of course it's profoundly uncomfortable, but heaven forbid we do this with fasting.
Yeah, I'm down on the floor, right? I'm like, I'm in so much, I've just killed myself. I'm down on the floor, and I'm like, okay, 90 seconds, time to get up and do another one until I'm down on the floor again. Yeah.
And then we kind of look up to people when they're like, yeah, I love it. I love the pain. Say Jose Maria Escriva has in his The Way, he says, blessed be pain. I love that. Like basically it's the equivalent of like the bodybuilders or the athletes being like, I love the pain. I love the intensity. Yeah. Right?
And that's why I love that image of virtue just as spiritual muscles, right? Like you can't build any muscles without resistance, right? And virtue isn't just doing good, right? It's firm and habitual, right? Like it's firm. I'm doing it harder and harder each time, right? And that idea of growing in strength until you've totally, you're at total self-mastery, right? And then suddenly you're able to just give yourself away.
Yeah.
To whatever it is that you have to do, or whoever needs love, right?
Yeah, you stretch yourself. And like I love to say is, suffering stretches our capacity to love. And it's because doing what's good, doing what's loving, it's like a muscle, like you said. And when we're stretching ourselves constantly, even when we feel bad or whatever, we're stretched and we're ready to go.
Yeah. And just, I mean, it's hard to even begin to talk about suffering, right? When in a culture like ours, where comfort is everywhere.
It's funny,
we turn.
We'll be okay with it with sports.
Yeah.
Sports, entrepreneurs, for business, like you talk about crushing it in a business. Yeah. But this doesn't translate over.
That's for money, and money's going to be gone, right? And money is going to be gone.
Exactly. It's crazy. Well, this was a good introduction conversation. We talked about temperance. We're going to get into other virtues in a little bit. But thanks everybody for paying attention. And this was the first of the cardinal virtues, and we're going to work our way then to the theological virtues. So thanks so much, Rob, and we'll continue the conversation.